This open meeting of the Arlington Finance Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the state of emergency from the COVID-19 virus. We've been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of the public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with the agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely, so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting, and ensuring that public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment only in writing by email to tbradley@town.arlington.ma.us. I don't think there's a .com there. Is there a .com at the end? Yes, there is .com. For this meeting, the Finance Committee is convening by the video by Zoom app as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may join and comment. Please notice that the meeting is being recorded and that some of the attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and take out the screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials have been provided members of this body, and they're also available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public's encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless the chair notes otherwise. The ground rules for the meeting are that the chair will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they include their remarks, the chair invites members to provide any comments, questions, or motions. Please hold until you are recognized and your name is called. Please remember to mute your phone or your computer when you're not speaking, and please remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in colloquy with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. Due to the size of my laptop screen, I may not be able to see all members at once. If someone has raised their hand and I have not noticed, I hereby request that Tara Bradley or any LaCourte please bring this to my attention. Finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. And at this point, I would like to confirm that all the members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. The members, when I call your name, please indicate your presence by saying yes or aye. Grant Gibeon?
Yes, here.
Shane Blundell?
Here.
John Ellis? Micaiah Healy?
Here.
Brian Beck? Arif Padaria? Sophie Migliazzo?
Present.
Jonathan Wallach?
Here.
Charles Foskett's here. Shailene Pokris? Daryl Harmer?
Here.
Annie LaCourte?
Here.
Alan Jones?
Here.
George Koser?
Here.
Bill Keller?
Here.
Alan Tosti?
Here.
Wanda Nascimento?
Here.
Christine Deschler?
Here.
Dean Carmen?
Here.
David McKenna?
Here.
Thank you. Oh, Tara Bradley?
Here.
Thank you. Okay, everybody is here that's here. People that aren't here aren't here. I'd just like to make a couple of comments. First of all, happy Valentine's Day, everyone. I hope no one's going to be in trouble with their spouse or significant other because of celebrating Valentine's Day with the Finance Committee.
Too late.
Too late. I'd like to also apologize to Micaiah for my confusing email about presenting more of her budget at the beginning of the meeting. Apparently, there's a problem with one of her meetings and that she had changed the schedule and notified Tara. Tara had it under control. So I guess I have to learn how to keep out of Tara's way and not jump to any conclusions without consultation. It appears also to me that Tara has the FinCom SharePoint site working pretty well and sharing all of our documents. So I encourage you to use it. It's every bit as good as it was last year, and I find it quite valuable. Tara, do we have a draft warrant yet? I don't think so, do we?
So I have just followed up with Ashley on that. And so there was a previous version of it. And do you know if we, as the Finance Committee, assign article numbers to these, or if that's something that their department does before they give it to us?
They do it, but we have given them instructions on
Okay.
how to do it properly. And
Okay.
they just simply follow the method that they used that we got them to use last year, which is to put the general government articles first, then the redevelopment board, and then the finance committee, and then the resolutions, the finance articles, and then the resolutions. It'll work just fine.
Okay. I
Charlie?
will follow up on that.
Yes.
Just as Tara, as a reference point, the numbers on the articles are generally like the last thing that occurs, because unless they've changed how they do things, like once the warrant closes, one of the first things they try to do is remove duplicate articles. So if there are two articles of the exact same, they might try to get one of the proponents to withdraw it.
Okay.
Then so they don't have confusion, then they try to organize it. So if you're seeing warrants that without numbers, that's totally normal until the last second.
Well, historically, we've always had draft versions with numbers. So I don't think that's a.
We've had draft versions without numbers as well, Charlie.
We could have. I would can't recall it, to be honest, but I recall draft versions with numbers. So also Tara has some information on ethics training, and maybe Tara, you could just make some comments and bring people up to date on where you are on that.
Okay, sure. So with the ethics training that is provided by the state in an online portal, I have clarification that we need to complete that every 2 years if you're serving on a committee or some capacity on behalf of the town. So I have that 2 folks have done it this year. Everyone else completed it in February or March of 2020. So most everyone is going to need to complete that training this year, unless you are Sophie or George Koser. And so I can, oh, and Grant has one, okay, too. Why don't you send that over to me? Oh, okay. Anyway, so I will send out an email that will link to the ethics committee training. And that's something that's supposed to take about an hour online. And then if you could just follow up with me with your certificate that you get at the end, that would be really helpful. And I can get that over to Julie Brazil, who keeps those for her records as well. And I see Al has his hand up.
Al Tosti.
Yeah, I just wanted to let people know, I had a conversation with Peter Howard today, and just wanted to let people know if they want to send him a card or something. He goes in for surgery tomorrow. It's heart surgery. He says it's fairly routine. He told me what was happening. But he's 85 years old. So I thought if people around 7 to 9 tomorrow morning could think about it, to send their thoughts and prayers that everything goes well. And maybe if you have a chance, a card. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Also, Sarah, did you notice that John Ellis is here and Don Seltzer is present as a member of the public? Shailene is here. So you're gonna send out an email on the the ethics training, right, Tara?
Yes, with a link to where to go into the portal. And you don't need any sort of code to get in. You just will click on the link and start it. It takes about an hour. And then at the end, you're going to get a certificate. And if you could just download that and send it to me, I will make sure it gets to Julie Brazil.
Charlie, I have a question.
Yes, yes, Annie.
It's Christine, but
Christine,
I have
sorry.
I've already taken the test and I've already been resworn and I have given my certificate to the clerk already. Tara, do you want an extra copy of that? Or
That would be great. Yeah, it must have been when I talked to her last, it must have happened after that. So yeah, if you wouldn't mind sending me a copy, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Anything else on our ethics training?
Nothing else on that. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so now we have three sets of minutes. We have January 31st, we have February 2nd, and we have February 9th. So, we have that right?
Yes, and there were a few updates. Thank you to those who sent me information on those updates. I'm going to share my screen and I can show everyone the updates on the minutes. And we can start with the 31st of January, which was our first meeting. Let me make this a little bigger. Can everyone see my screen? Okay. Thank you, Al Tosti, for the updates on attendance. I think this was it for updates. So the document that I sent out last week and then again on Sunday night, the only updates have been made to the attendance listing. Does anyone have any points that they want to kind of look at here before we vote on January 31st minutes?
Any comments on the minutes?
No.
So is there a motion on the minutes to approve the minutes of January 31st as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
So it's moved and second for January 31st minutes. I'll take a roll call. Grant Gibeon,
Yes.
Shane Blundell,
Yes.
John Ellis,
Yes.
Kaya Healy,
Yes.
Brian Beck, Arif Padaria, Sophie Migliazzo,
Yes.
Jonathan Wallach,
Yes.
Shailene Pokris, Shailene,
Sorry, I guess I didn't come through. Yes.
thank you. Daryl Harmer,
Yes.
Andy LaCourte,
Yes.
Alan Jones,
Yes.
George Koser,
Yes.
Bill Keller,
Yes.
Alan Tosti,
Yes.
Wanda Nascimento,
Yes.
Christine Deschler,
yes,
Dean Carmen,
Yes,
and David McKenna.
Yes.
Thank you. The minutes are approved unanimously. And Alan Jones, did you want to make a comment about recording the votes on the minutes?
Well, this applies to the February 9th minutes. So we're just going to ask Tara if in the minutes, if the bottom line number of the approved budget could be recorded in the minutes.
Yes.
It helps at the end of the day just to double check things. In fact, Pete used to had a table at the end of the minutes with all of the budgets listed right out of the manager's book. And as they were voted, he would just put the voted number and the date of the vote. And it just helps at the end of the day to make sure that, I didn't mishear anything. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I can do
Thanks,
that.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Alan. Okay, the minutes of February 2nd have been distributed and are presented on the screen. Are there any comments or remarks on the minutes of February 2nd?
I did not receive any comments about this set that I remember.
So is there a motion on the minutes of February 2nd?
So moved. So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and second to accept the minutes of February 2nd. Grant Gibeon,
Yes.
Shane Blundell,
Yes.
John Ellis,
Yes.
Kaya Healy,
Yes.
Brian Beck, Arif Padaria, Sophie Migliazzo,
Yes.
Jonathan Wallach,
Yes.
Shailene,
Yes.
Daryl,
Yes.
Annie,
Yes.
Alan,
Yes.
George Koser,
Yes.
Bill Keller,
Yes.
Al Tassi,
yes,
Wanda,
Yes.
Christine,
Yes.
Dean,
yes,
and David.
Yes.
The minutes are unanimously accepted for February 2nd. And the minutes for February 9th, could you?
I will
display
come back to those after I add in the budget numbers.
that?
Unless you,
Why don't we just postpone until next week?
okay.
Meeting, we can do that. Thank you. Okay. So the next item on the agenda are the budgets, and jumping back to the select board and legal, David and Sophie.
Okay, thank you, Charlie. Sophie and I, again, last week had a busy week. We met with a number of department heads and we reviewed some of the concerns that were expressed by some of the
David, we've lost you again. David. David, we lost everything you said.
Yeah, okay, I'm just having tremendous problems with this internet. Anyway, I had tech people out here last week and they thought they solved the problem. Anyway, going back to the select budget. So if you lose me again, Sophie is very well prepared to jump in, right, Sophie?
That was a yes.
Okay. Okay, a couple of questions that were expressed concerns about job descriptions in the selectman's office. I want to tell you that the job description for office manager was revised, updated April 2021, as well as the administrative assistant, that was revised as of and amended May 2021. And that was done by the Board of Selectmen in conjunction with the executive secretary, board administrator. The third job, the principal clerk select board, that is in the process of being revised as well. That job is presently vacant. So and these are, I believe these are all posted if you wanted to go online and check them on all these job descriptions. As far as the principal clerk, there was a question about the title. That's under the pay and classification plan. And some of these are etched in stone. So that's why you might see principal clerk and typist. But when you read the job description, the job itself is far more than just typing. Having said that, there are a couple of concerns that both Sophie and I have tried to address to the best of our ability. They are, as far as we can, they are personnel matters pertaining to positions within the Board of Selectmen. And the Board of Selectmen are responsible for the personnel issues and matters within. And I don't think we should comment any further on that at this time. So with that, I will present the budget as presented in our budget book for FY23 for the Board of Selectmen's expenses and office budget. Are there any questions?
Any questions on the Board of Selectmen's budget? So, so there's a vacancy in the in that office. Do they plan to fill it, David?
It is our understanding that they do plan to fill it within the future.
So I would like to add that it has been vacant for probably around 10 months or so. So going on a year with seemingly no effort to fill it at this so far in that 10-month period.
So, you have moved the entire Board of Selectmen's budget.
We do.
Is there a second?
Second.
So it's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions for David or Sophie on the Board of Selectmen's budget?
I have one question.
Yes,
Oh,
Shane.
Sorry, what's the number we're voting on? I see a taxation total and then I see an accounting and auditing total. So what is the total amount we're voting on?
We're voting on the taxation total.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, I will take the roll call on,
Charlie,
yes,
you want to vote on both that and the audit and cut out a couple minutes?
would you make a motion to vote on the, well, we haven't put that on the agenda, Alan. So we really, that wasn't noticed. On the selectmen's budget. Grant Gibeon,
Yes.
Shane Blundell,
Yes.
John Ellis,
Yes.
Micaiah Haley. Micaiah Haley,
Yes, sorry, I didn't unmute.
Sophie Migliazzo,
Yes.
Jonathan Wallach,
Yes.
Shailene,
Yes.
Darrell,
Yes.
Annie,
Yes.
Alan Jones,
Yes.
George Koser,
Yes.
Bill Keller,
Yes.
Alan Tosti,
Yes,
Linda Nascimento,
Yes.
Christine Deschler,
Yes,
Dean Carmen,
Yes,
and David McKenna.
Yes,
So the vote is unanimous for the Board of Selectmen. And can you repeat the number again for us, David, so that it'll get into the minutes appropriately?
numbers 310-042.
310-042, Select Board Taxation Total 2023. Thank you.
Okay.
Next budget.
Next budget would be the legal budget. The information starts on page 54.
I think you have the assessor there, yeah.
Go one more page. Go one more page.
There we go.
Sorry about that.
Okay. As you can see, there's an increase in the salary and wages, an increase of $9,407. Previously, there had been no questions on this budget when we were reviewing them when we were going through the review. So with that, I'll take any questions that somebody might have, if they have any.
Are there any questions for David and some on the legal budget?
Shane Blundell has his hand up.
Jane,
I'm sorry, that was I forgot to take it down. Thank you, Tara.
no.
Thank you. I'm good.
Any other questions? So I noticed that the legal expense budget is pretty much the same. There was a drop from 2021 to 2022. Did that come up in your discussions at all?
Sophie, is that in our notes?
Well, we did go into generally what this bucket of expenses is, because compared to other departments, they don't seem to, they don't have different line items for everything. The majority of this is outside counsel to the town. So when the town has to hire attorney, other firms in those legal bills. So it just really is going to depend year to year on how many matters and in that fluctuation there, I think. There's nothing
Sure.
in particular.
Is there a question? So could you
Charlie?
slip? Yes. Yes,
Charlie, I
Alan.
just wanted to point out that the 191,358 is an actual number and the 136,665 is the budget number. The budget has been voted at 136,665 for the last 4 years. So
Okay.
it looks like the actual was actually much higher than the approved budget.
So we would assume there would have been reserve fund transfers or transfers from another department to meet those expense requirements.
I believe there was in one of those years. If memory serves me right.
Probably from you, or
Yes.
Can we go to the salary section here, please?
Okay.
Now, there is a, the deputy town council workers' compensation officer, wasn't there? Didn't we have a retirement there a year or two ago?
Yes, we did.
And that person came in at a somewhat lower total compensation, I believe, right?
Yes, what they did is they revised that position with the duties and responsibilities. If you remember, that was done after the Ed Billingworth retired, and they revised the position and gave the title of Deputy Town Council and Workman's Comp together. Prior to that, it was Workman's Comp was a separate position altogether.
Was it a separate budget?
No, it was in
okay.
this budget.
Okay. So can we go back to the prior page, please? So wouldn't we expect the salaries to have dropped? And they did. Okay, they dropped from 2020 to 2021.
Yes.
Okay. Are there any other questions for David and Sophie on the legal budget? Yes, Kaya.
Yes, hi. Sophie, I was wondering, or Dave, when would be the case where outside counsel, like what sort of situations, particularly like this year, would require our department to go?
I could answer that at different time. It depends upon what the situation is and what the legal matter is. We might have counsel, outside counsel for environmental issues. We might have counsel for labor issues. We certainly have outside counsel for the Muga property issue. And these issues come up periodically. That's just an example of what they do with outside counsel.
Thanks.
Okay. For any other questions on this budget?
I have a
Okay, then we'll-
question, Charlie,
Yeah.
sorry. Where am I finding the number of the budget that we're voting on so that I can get that down?
It's a legal taxation total on the page that's on displayed.
Okay, and which number for the budget is being put in? Like which budget for all the things that you guys are voting on should be put in?
Tara, someplace in share.
Oh, that thing. Okay, yes. Yep. Oh, you're on mute, Alan.
Yeah, sorry, there's a correspondence table someplace in
Okay,
SharePoint.
yes, that one. Okay, I thought it was on this document. Got it. Thank you.
So,
The manager doesn't number the budgets. We do.
okay, David, you want to make a motion on the legal budget?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that present the budget as printed in the FY23 book. It's 603,119. 603,119.
Thanks, Dave.
I'm
So-
sorry. I'm sorry, that's incorrect. It's 490,561.
Thank you.
I put my glasses
second?
back on.
Second.
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 So it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, Grant Gibeon,
Yes.
Shane,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Micaiah,
Yes.
Brian, Reef, Sophie,
Yes.
Jonathan,
Yes.
Shailene,
Yes.
Daryl,
Yes.
Annie,
Yes.
Alan Jones,
Yes.
George,
Yes.
Bill Keller,
Yes.
Al Tassi,
Yes,
Wanda,
Yes.
Christine,
Yes.
Dean,
Yes.
and David.
Yes.
Thank you. It's the unanimous vote and for 490,561 for the legal budget. So the next budget is, David, you want to go ahead?
Yes, the next budget, we're going to go back to the election budget, which is on page 60 in our budget book.
So I think on the minutes, or on the agenda, we're actually doing the Board of Registrars, not the election that's noticed, I think, for another meeting. So I don't know, Charlie, I had asked, can we do the election one or not?
Yes.
Okay. Keeps on going out. Jim.
No. So we're good. So we're going forward with election, right? Election budget?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And there was just a follow-up question on the election budget that we dug into. The response, so the question was about these reimbursements for early elections and salaries that run for workers from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. on election days. And
But, hang on just a second.
Yeah.
Oh, Sophie, that was your question. I'm sorry. Go right ahead.
yeah, so that was we discussed that last time, and that was the question we had asked to follow up some more. And so what happens is the election in the past, it seems like it wasn't always, early voting wasn't always budgeted for. And what they actually did is just borrowed from general funds. And then when the state would reimburse the town for that early voting, it would go to an agency fund in the clerk's office, and then that would go to reimbursing the general fund. So it seems that the number this year is higher because with our new town clerk, everything is being managed. The numbers are being closely put in the right spots, let's say, in the right buckets. And so we're now seeing an actual number for a budget that includes early voting that wasn't necessarily always captured in previous budgets, which would explain almost 60,000, I think, in the number increase. And what happens, and so I followed up again, now that that's in the budget, when that gets reimbursed, it'll go into the agency fund and will go towards any additional expenses for early voting, and then typically goes to free cash. But of course, it sits in that office, and if the clerk had a reason and it was a good year to use some extra money for extra filing or something in that office, obviously it could go towards that kind of expense. If that answers.
Who raised that question? Do you remember?
I think I brought it up, and Christine, I think, had followed up and wanted some more clarification on it. I think Christine has her hand up right now.
Yes, Christine?
Right. A couple of questions. Sophie, do you know how much is in that fund now?
Currently today, no, they get reimbursed a year after, actually, so reimbursement come the following year. So in 2022, we'll get reimbursed for 2021. And
at the end of the year, if there's any money left, it goes into free cash.
Correct.
Do you have any ballpark of how much these monies are?
Yes, and I think in a previous year, the reimbursement numbers, well, it was on one spreadsheet we got, I think for 2020, the reimbursement was one for 18,000 and one for 11,000, roughly.
That's per election.
Right, it was, so fiscal year 2021, it looks like there was about 18,000 for the September, November. Oh, and another 17,000. So it was 18 and 17,000.
I was just intrigued by what you said that they borrowed from the general fund. I didn't know that that is legally possible. I thought that you cannot spend unless town meeting appropriates, and this money wasn't appropriated. So I'm kind of intrigued that that happened.
That's how it was explained by the comptroller to me this morning, but I don't know. And then they reclassify. So there's reclassification that takes place at some point. I don't know if it's technically borrowing that's maybe a general term, but there seems to definitely be confusion on past practice because the budget detail we have shows 0 for early voting, but some people I spoke to said that the early voting was budgeted for, but the line item on the budget was 0. So I don't know. It seems like everybody is in agreement, just as with all the other numbers for the town clerks, that we're going to start being able to trust these numbers much more in being in the right line items in the right categories. That wasn't necessarily the case before. And so, for example, they were saying, if you look at the actual number for, let's see, 2021. There was, right, so the salaries for 2021 show 135 as the actual, but it was actually 160, but because of some of the reimbursements, it only shows as 135. So when we compare numbers, it's more.
I think this probably goes back to the issue of year-over-year carryovers that when Julie Wyman was here, was trying to address that with the new reporting scheme. Hopefully that will be addressed going forward in the future. I don't know if that answers your question, Christine.
I will ponder that. Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Sophie.
What, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Al.
One thing that might be happening is when the town meeting appropriates money, it appropriates one expense line item. And so I think they're basically using their own expense line item, hoping that the money from the Secretary of State comes in time to go back into that budget. So I don't think they're not spending money that wasn't appropriated. They're just spending it ahead of time, hoping the money comes in on time. Otherwise, they'd have to come to the FinCom for a reserve fund transfer. I think that's how it worked.
That could well be the case.
And I do think now it's definitely in the details that we have on how they came up with their budget numbers. They're definitely allocating, almost 60,000 to early voting that wasn't showing up before. So it seems to be.
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Alan.
I just want to note that the appropriation for personnel services in 2021 was $161,000. So it's more than the actuals.
But I was right. I was told that the actual, I don't know. Again, I was told this morning that it was actually 160, but because of the reimbursements, it's only showing up as 135.
Right. I'm saying the appropriation was 161. So I don't think they overspent.
And the balance then would go into free cash one way or the other. Okay. Any further questions on this budget?
Charlie, excuse me if I could. On the reimbursement, the town never knows what the dollar figure is going to be until they receive it. And we've never been able to kind of understand how the state formulates what's coming back to the cities and towns on these elections. That's always been a mystery.
Okay, are you going to make a motion on this budget?
Yes, I will. On the election budget of 2,45745 as presented in the FY23 budget book.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
So it's been moved and seconded for $245,745. Any further discussion?
Yeah, Charlie, sorry, this is
Yes.
Shane. I have one question. So I just want to make sure I understand this, and thank you everybody for your patience. So the 181,995, some portion of that, sometime in the next fiscal year, will hopefully get a reimbursement for this from the state for early voting. So the appropriation might not be, or the actual might not be 181. It might be something less. Is that what we're saying?
That's
Sorry if
my,
I-
Yes, a possibility, yes.
But the formula and the timing is not what we want, but so maybe we're shooting higher than we need, but early voting is an important thing that people like, right?
Well, the number has to be appropriated change so it can be spent. Okay.
Okay,
And if we were to appropriate a net number and it didn't come in, then there would be a problem. So when the reimbursement comes in a sense, there's a excess amount in that budget, and at the end of the year, it goes into free cash. But as
Okay.
Sophie and David have said, we don't know when it's coming in, and we don't know what the number is. So they have to make the appropriation for what they think is the full cost.
got it. Thank you.
You're
And we
welcome.
also, Charlie, if I could, we also don't know what in our next elections, our next election cycle, which is September, November, that's the state general election. We don't know if early voting, how many days early voting is going to take place. In the presidential election, early voting, the primary was 7 days. The regular election was 10 days. That's not including the actual day of elections. So we're waiting for the state to say in the next state primary, how many days of early voting and how many days for general election. We don't know that either.
Any
Thanks.
further questions on this, discussion on this article?
Yeah, I have one.
Go ahead, Dean.
And I don't know if it's a question much as a comment on the reimbursement timing. I would have to guess if I remember when we've not guess, but if I recollect back to when we've discussed matters similar to this in the past, is one thing that's occurring, which I think as finance committee members, we should be happy with, is that the state has been cracking down on net accounting at the municipal level and requiring gross accounting. So if you remember at the treasurer's office several years ago, they used to be able to bury certain fees for like tax title into the they used to be able to bury it by not recording the expense, and when the proceeds came in, they just offset each other. And then the DOR said that wasn't acceptable anymore. And I think it's the same thing here, which is net accounting where you bury the expense and the reimbursement so no one ever sees it, isn't allowed anymore. Now that is a good thing, I think, for us and for the taxpayers, because it provides a great level of transparency to what's really going on. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? So it's been moved and seconded. Let's go to a vote on the elections budget. Grant Gibeon,
Yes.
Shane Blundell,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Kaya,
Yes.
Brian Beck-Arif, not here. Sophie,
Yes.
Jonathan Wallach,
Yes.
Shailene Pokris,
Yes.
Daryl Harmer,
Yes.
Annie LaCourte,
Yes.
Alan Jones,
Yes.
George Koser,
Yes.
William Keller,
Yes.
Alan Tosti,
Yes,
Wanda Nascimento,
Yes.
Christine Deschler,
Yes.
Dean Carmen,
Yes.
David McKenna.
Yes.
The vote is unanimous on the election vote for the amount of $245,745. Before we go to the next budget, I have been appropriately guided by our esteemed former chairman, and I have misinterpreted the select board vote. So if we could go back to the page on the select board vote, I will explain. It's great to have Al Tassi here. He knows where all the bodies are. Select board is,
Page 22.
okay. So, right, just stop right there. That's good. So, within the select board, we voted the select board taxation total. That's for the select board operations. The accounting and audit report costs are reported under the select board category, but they are not totaled. So in other words, that $78,000 for the audit report is independent of the $310,042 that we voted. So we have to spend that money to provide for the annual audit report. So I think a motion in order to vote $78,000 could be, or it is in order to make that motion. Al Tassi, would you like to make that motion?
sure. Make the motion to appropriate 78,000 for the annual audit in the selectmen's budget.
Second.
Second.
Is there a second? Okay.
Second.
So I'm now going to spend the extra 2 minutes that Al wanted to save a while back. Okay, Grant Gibeon,
Yes.
Shane,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Micaiah,
Yes.
Sophie,
Yes.
Jonathan,
Yes.
Shailene,
Yes.
Daryl Harmer,
Yes.
Annie LaCourte,
Yes.
Alan Jones,
Yes.
George Kosar,
Yes.
William Keller,
Yes.
Al Tosti,
Yes.
Wanda Nascimento,
Yes.
Christine Deschler,
Yes.
Dean Carmen,
Yes,
and David McKenna.
Yes.
Thank you. Unanimous vote on the audit budget. Thank you, Al.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
just a comment. Traditionally, in the Finance Committee report to town meeting, those have been rolled up. So the bottom line the town meeting would vote on for the select board was the combination of administration and license, the select board costs, the elections and the accounting. And town meeting only voted on the number that was rolled up. Now, this year, the elections go away, but the elections will be rolled up into the clerk's budget. So the bottom line vote that town meeting will include the elections budget when they vote on the clerk's budget. That's the way it's been done traditionally. I was writing you an email to see if you wanted to continue that practice, but so when Al suggested it was
by the
consistent.
practice, you mean rolling up the audit report and the select board taxation?
And until this year, it was the select board cost, the elections cost, and the audit cost were all rolled up into a single number that town meeting voted on.
Yeah, so I think
Next year, it won't include the elections, but the elections will be rolled up into the clerk's budget.
right. We just want to have a single number. It's a shame it's not shown on here, but that's okay.
Right, agreed. So I just wanted to say what Al suggested is consistent with past practice that we've been doing in the report to town meeting. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Next budget is,
Charlie, if I may,
yes,
I know that on the agenda, the registrar, Board of Registrars wasn't on the agenda. However, it was part of the clerk's overall budget. It's just a separate item in the clerk's, but comes under the clerk's because the clerk is the Board of Registrar.
We have the Board of Registrars on the agenda.
It's on the
for
agenda.
tonight.
Oh,
Yes.
I thought you said you didn't.
It was the election, technically.
Oh, the elections, yeah, that we came back to.
okay, let's move forward on the Board of Registrars, please.
Okay. That's on page, in our book, page 62. Okay, but there is actually a $150 decrease in the salaries and wage line. And that's due because they're no longer using IT support on election night. They're doing it themselves. And as far as other wages, if you'll notice on the wage and salary, we have the assistant registrar of voters. That's the full-time position. The clerk receives a stipend of $1,500 because she is, by virtue of her position as elected clerk, she becomes the Board of Registrar. And then we have 3 additional Board of Registrars, and they receive a stipend of $500 apiece. And we also have included in that is the town moderator that also receives a stipend of $500. And that has not increased in quite some time.
Thank you. I recall we discussed earlier that the reason that one of those expense budgets has gone up by 3,200 was because of early voting. Is that what that was?
Yes.
The
There's,
9,800, 13,000.
And there's mailings that have to go out pertaining to early voting. There's notices, there's index, there's some type of cards that go out to the voters as well. She mentioned that. And she also had to let voters know if the Board of Selectmen in their wisdom decides to vote to move the precincts, some of the precincts, that has to be sent out on notice as well.
Okay, any questions for David or Sophie on the registrars, Board of Registrars? Hearing none. Motion's in order, David.
I move that we accept the 74,862 as printed in the budget book for FY23 for the
Is there
register.
a second?
Second.
Thank you, Annie. Any further discussion on the vote for the 2023 budget Board of Registrars, $74,862? Hearing none. Move to the vote. Grant Gibeon,
Yes.
Shane Blundell,
Yes.
John Ellis,
Yes.
Micaiah,
Yes.
Sophie Migliazzo,
Yes.
Jonathan Wallach,
Yes.
Shailene Pokris,
Yes.
Daryl Harmer,
Yes.
Annie McCourt,
Yes.
George Koser,
Yes.
William Keller,
Yes.
Al Tosti,
Yes.
Wanda Nascimento,
Yes.
Christine Deschler,
Yes.
Dean Carmen,
Yes.
David.
Yes.
Did I miss somebody?
Alan
Me.
Jones.
Alan Jones. Thank you.
Yes.
I just realized I had slipped along here. Thank you, Alan Jones. Okay. Thank you, Alan. All right. Thank you very much, David and Sophie.
We do have one more budget.
What's your additional budget?
Planning and community development.
Those are
And-
scheduled for Wednesday.
Yeah, so I think let's do that on Wednesday. It's not on the agenda. And it's a
Okay.
significant budget.
And that also includes, Charlie, the redevelopment board budget as well.
Yes, okay,
So we'll do that Wednesday.
okay. So that would move us to libraries and the enterprise funds, Annie LaCourte and Wanda Nascimento.
Yes. Tara, if I could actually share my screen, I've got multiple things to show.
Sure.
Let me get where I'm going here. And I will share my screen.
So while you're doing that, Micaiah, have you had a chance to check on, remember we had a discussion about the clerk salary and the library salary? Do you have a chance to discuss that with the personnel department?
Tomorrow morning.
Okay, thank you.
I do have that question did come up before the public discussion of it. So I have a half of an answer, but
Well, let's wait till you have your meeting. We'll discuss it later. Thank you.
perfect.
Okay, there's got to be a way to make this bigger.
I was hoping that you're going to say that. I think maybe,
Use Zoom.
Yeah, I should be able to.
View in the top menu.
Is that making it bigger for you guys?
yes, it sure does.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Excellent. Okay, so these are our notes from the budget review. We started by letting Andrea simply talk about her budget, and then we asked what I thought were the major questions from the committee. And Andrea was able to provide us with some slides, which I'm going to look at quickly. And those slides are, where am I? Well, anyways, we created a folder in the FY23 budget folder, created a subfolder for Health and Human Services and libraries, which has these slides in it, if you want to look at them further. And what's on these slides, first of all, is the answer to the question of what happened during COVID, which I will not go through tediously, but just to say that they were very, very active, making sure they could still deliver materials to residents who wanted to take things out of the library and needed to take things out of the library. Various creative ways of getting those materials out, including, various forms of pickup and drop off. And that continued through, next slide, please, 2021. And they believe that all that is not yet restored is the public use of the community rooms and conference rooms due to the restrictions on public meetings. The answer to the question about the Fox Library spending is that there was very little savings. The staff was moved back to work at the Robbins to assist with all of these sort of during COVID operations matters. And the building itself still had to be maintained, cleaned, a minimum temperature maintained, so on and so forth. So those savings were not significant. As part of this slide presentation, and I'm just going to do this really quickly, I wanted to show you this pie chart, which you may be interested in looking at, which shows you how much of the library budget comes from the town and how much of that comes from other sources. Obviously, we know about the state aid, but Friends, the Arlington Libraries Foundation, and the trust funds also provide a significant amount of their budget. And that budget, with one exception, is spent on materials. Because it's a variable part of their income, it's difficult to use it to support staff consistently. And I believe that one exception is paying for some Saturday and Sunday hours. And then there's a couple of.
Andy, could I ask you to go back, please?
Sure.
So it says the operating budget is 891,000. And the payroll was 2.115 million. Is the payroll not part of the operating budget?
I'm not, I wouldn't, when we go look at the budget, I think that will be clear.
Okay.
No, I don't think I think she's probably thinking of operating budget exclusive of payroll.
Okay.
But then she's got an FY22 total here. I think what she's suggesting is non-personnel expenses covered by the municipality are this slice.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. And then there was can you please go to the next slide? I do not know why. There we go. So it's interesting to note as one of the metrics that Andrea measures by, that Arlington is one of the more active communities in terms of cardholders using the libraries. And also as a percentage of total population, cardholders is a percentage of total population, we're pretty high up there. And then that the circulation, interestingly enough, has been going up. She's projecting that they will have had a total circulation for FY22 of 900,000 items. So COVID has not, in essence, has not reduced the amount of work the library staff are doing. That people have rediscovered the library and use seems to be going up. And interestingly enough, it's particularly up amongst children and teens. And one of the things that she noted is that in order to meet this new burden of material being circulated and children and teen use of the library, she had hoped to add some personnel to expand the number of children's librarians, which we were not able to support in the budget because we are living within our means, as it were. So I just wanted to note that as an example of fiscal control. So other questions that we asked were about the budget itself. And I am happy to look at that budget and answer any of your questions. I can tell you a few things. This, as you will note from the budget explainer, this $15,000 and this $6,000 are not gone from the entire budget. They are merely moved to facilities. And Andrea noted that she needs to report any spending on facilities, library facilities, to the state. So even though they've moved to the facilities budget, she's still going to need to know how that money is spent. She did a very careful analysis of electricity to knock that $10,000 off this budget and use that savings to increase the materials budget, which has not had a significant increase in a while. Other contracted services that's essentially our Minuteman membership costs. And there's been some shifting around between the various materials budgets, that films are becoming more popular and recordings less popular. And she's hoping actually to roll all the materials budgets into one line eventually, because she thinks this keeping separate is just tedious. The Fox offset is entirely money from the Little Fox shop. And the reason that salaries are as flat as they are here, this increase is mostly increases due to the increase in minimum wage for library pages. But otherwise, the budget is pretty flat because they've had some turnover and we're able to sort of, follow the practice we always hope people will follow of hiring in the new person at a lower in the salary range. And I believe, let me just get my notes. Yeah, oh, and just a reminder that the overtime budget for the library is basically used to pay for weekend overtime hours and covers personal time off when others have to substitute for someone's personal time off. And that weekend pay is premium pay contractually. So that's why there is an overtime budget in the library budget. And I think that's every question you could possibly want to ask. But let me know if there are other questions that you have about this budget. And Wanda, if you have anything you want to add.
No, I have nothing else to add.
Any questions for Wanda on the library budget?
Alan Jones has his hand.
Alan Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Was there any discussion of the Library of Things? It's a relatively new service. I don't know whether there's any, much expense. Is it popular? Is it growing? Is it shrinking? Are they limited by anything?
That did not come up.
Okay.
I mean, we talked about materials generally. And generally, the circulation of items from the library is up. And I would anticipate that probably the circulation of items from the library of things is up. But I'm happy to go back and I'm sure Andrea would love to give you a report on that, Alan, if you want me to go back and ask her.
Yeah, I'd be curious about it. It seems to be, I know libraries in general, that it's a growing thing to, have a lending library of items. So I'm curious about that. Of course, there's no line item for it, so I didn't know whether that was something that was becoming significant at some point. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the debate that goes back and forth in Andrea's head about, if she puts in a line item for every class of material, then suddenly we've got many line items and some of them become obsolete and they have to go away and da, 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 as opposed to simply having a materials budget. Are you done, Alan? Because John Ellis has got his hand.
John Ellis. Yeah, John.
John?
Yes, I think there's two nonprofits supporting the Fox now. There's the Little Fox, which is in the library, and then there's the Fox, which is on, which is close to Walgreens. So are they both providing that $25,000, or is that a different line item? Because there was a whole political thing there with.
This did not come up in our conversation. The $25,000 was reported to me as support from the Little Fox shop.
Okay. Not budget, wouldn't change my vote, but there are two.
Yeah, and it's possible. So if you go back and you look at the slides here, right? We don't vote on any of this.
Oh.
So it may be that money's going through the foundation or through the Friends.
For Friends, I mean, the Friends says 38,000, but on the budget it said 25.
The Little Fox money would be in this municipal support because it's an offset. So that money goes into the general fund and comes back as an offset, I believe, is how we're doing that accounting. So that's treated separately from these other sort of what we would call off-budget funds. But
Okay.
this is not showing up as offsets. It's just supplement to the budget that goes directly to the library that we do not appropriate.
Okay, all right, well, maybe I'll ask next year.
Okay.
Any other questions on the library budget? Oh, Shane.
Thanks, Charlie, and thanks, Annie, for that presentation. Avid user of the library here. So just on that pie chart, though, how confident are we, like, in the subsequent fiscal years that, you know, that money will be there? I think it's like, my basic math is 300 grand, which is not an insignificant amount. I know we're not voting on that, but like,
Right.
are we confident that, like, these foundations?
So let's break it down a little bit. The state aid is a cherry sheet number, and there is always state support to libraries as long as we do not allow our support for our materials budget to slip. So the state has a little bit of a carrot there for us to not cut our materials budget in bad times. Similarly with the Minuteman Network, if we cut our budget too much and we don't have materials to circulate, the Minuteman Network drops us out of their membership. So we are motivated to keep materials up. The library trust funds are gifts that were made to the town, many of them 100 years ago. And that money's pretty stable. It's conservatively invested in, I can't remember the name of the funds, but El Tosti could tell us. So that income is pretty consistent. The Arlington Libraries Foundation raises that money, and I believe the Friends also raises that money annually. So I don't know, as you could say, that those numbers are stable the way that they are, but my understanding from Andrea is that what she does is she works with both of those groups, makes a request that they raise a certain amount of money, puts that in her budget, and hopes that they will be successful in raising that money. One of the reasons that these dollar amounts do not support personnel is because you need stable income to support personnel. So the worst thing that happens if the library's foundation or the Friends do not hit their number is that she's constrained in what materials she can buy. Does that make sense?
Very helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And that there's a dependency in that the materials also affects an accreditation of sorts. So that's an important key piece.
Oh, yeah, and there's actually an important thing to note there, which is that the library is currently undergoing a strategic plan. This is required, the strategic planning processes are also required by the state, and that strategic planning process has been funded by the Libraries Foundation.
So Annie, I have a question. It's at various times in the past, we faced the risk of the library being losing its accreditation.
Yes.
Is there any threat of that as we're sitting here today?
There is no threat of that as we're sitting here today. The thing that would threaten that is us making a deep cut in the materials budget.
Right.
So at least that's my recollection. So the threat we face is that, you know, if we fail to pass the override, or if we choose to see the library as a lower priority as we're moving towards the override and we're considering cuts, that we then eat into that materials budget. And when we eat into that materials budget, we start to endanger our Minuteman membership, our accreditation, and our state aid. So, and by that materials budget, I believe they don't mean the overall materials budget. They mean specifically the municipality's support of the materials budget. It has to be maintained at a certain level. Like, in other words, we can't substitute these other funds for actual municipal budgeting.
Okay.
But
other questions?
I'm happy to keep track of that.
Any other questions for Annie or Wanda on the library budget? Well, thank you for a very good presentation, Annie and Wanda. So I think a motion is in order for a vote. Can we look at the vote again up here?
Yes.
Okay.
So I move that we vote the budget as presented for a total of $2,633,731.
Second.
Second.
So the library budget has been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Okay, moving to a vote. Grant,
Yes.
Shane,
Yes.
John Ellis,
Yes.
Micaiah,
Yes.
Sophie,
Yes.
Jonathan Waller,
Yes.
Shailene,
Yes.
Daryl,
Yes.
Annie. Annie,
Yes, sorry, I was muted.
Alan Jones,
Yes.
George Koser,
Yes.
Bill Keller,
Yes.
Alan Tosti,
Yes.
Christine Deckler,
Yes.
Ian Carmen,
Yes.
and David McKenna.
Yes.
Thank you. It's a unanimous vote for, could you slide that up? Get that number back up there so I can repeat it. Thank you. Unanimous vote for $2,633,731 for the library budget. Thank you.
Wanda has her hand up. Wanda, did you want to?
Oh, Wanda.
No, you didn't call me, but I say yes.
Oh,
It probably doesn't matter.
Oh, I didn't. I'm sorry. When I get
That's
to
okay.
the side of this page, you know, I can't get back to the names.
you get tired.
Yeah, it's my
Okay.
horizontal peripheral vision probably isn't so good.
Okay. Are we ready to move on to the recreation and the rink?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I want to start by reminding everybody that these are enterprise funds. So their income and their outgo must match, or there needs to be a surplus. There can't be a deficit. I do want to note, and let me see if I can increase this again, that the balance of retained earnings in the Recreation Enterprise Fund is $732,459.
As of what date?
I believe as of today, but possibly as of the end of last fiscal year.
Thank you. So just for the record, Tara, you should note that number in the minutes, okay?
Yeah. So Tara, all of these documents that I'm showing are in this folder in SharePoint. So let me know if you need to get to them.
The human services budget, yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah, they're all in that folder. Okay. All right, so let's go back here. So the expenses for this budget, I think that what Joe, overarchingly, what Joe did here was he wanted to break his budget up a little bit more so that he understood what was the outgoing, the income for the various seasons of programming, and also for the after school and the preschool programming. So a lot of what looks like a lot of moving around of numbers here and big changes in those numbers, to a certain extent, some of that is just him reconfiguring his budget to give him a better view of what programming is earning money and which seasons are more or less popular, so on and so forth. We did ask about all of these changes in the numbers, and Wanda took extensive notes. So I'm prepared to answer a question about any of these line items anybody has a question about. We did start this morning by discussing revenue in this budget. And there was a lot of discussion about how revenue dropped during COVID, but it's coming back. And so he believes that most of his revenue estimates are pretty conservative and are based on what he's already seeing in the way of registration and what he believes is going to happen now that the RES project has been completed and so on and so forth. He is budgeting some use of retained earnings, but Joe's policy is that he does not spend, he wants to put that in the budget in case he needs it, but he doesn't spend it unless he needs it. So in other words, he's hoping he's budgeted conservatively and that his income will actually cover that without him having to go to the reserves. Are there any questions about any of this revenue on this side?
Any questions for Annie or Wanda on the Recreation Enterprise Fund? Alan?
I've heard talk that there was some sort of transfer between the recreation fund and the rink fund, since the rink had a lot of fixed costs and virtually no income for a while because of COVID. Was there any, is that real or is that just talk?
I don't believe that there was a transfer of funds, but Joe did say that he has added things to the recreation budget to more evenly distribute expenses between the recreation budget and the rink. So the recreation budget is covering more of the electricity, and he's including, I want to say this equipment and building dollars here is, he's including that on the recreation side to represent the fact that the recreation department's offices are in the building. So that was the only discussion we had about balancing between the two funds. When we get to the rink, you will see that the reserves are much smaller. And I didn't actually ask him how he supported personnel during COVID. So, I mean, I can go back and ask that if people are interested. I don't know whether he maintained staff and was able to, get emergency funds to cover that, or whether he had to let people go. I'm certain he didn't hire seasonal staff for programs that didn't happen.
Thank you.
Other questions? Micaiah?
Hiya.
I was just going to comment that I'm just looking at the line 5102, the salaries and wages temp. It does look like there's only 29,000 in the actual of
Yeah.
so it's
I
possible
believe that
that
reflects that, him not spending money when there was no activity.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Annie or Wanda? Yes, Shane.
Thanks, Charlie. Thanks, Andy. So I guess asking as a parent, I don't have kids that use this, but like any other comments about like demand for after school programming? Yeah, I guess maybe more of a general question than that, lots of kids, school kids, kids are back in session. Some parents I talked to, are facing challenges. So are there any plans in the near future? What are the limitations?
So it's interesting. His after school programming and his preschool program are both limited by physical infrastructure. He's renting a space on Mass Ave for the preschool. And that is relatively expensive. And then he uses the Gibbs School for the after school program, which he claims he's saying is not ideal for elementary school kids. So the one thing he's hoping to possibly do with some of his reserves in the future is to find a space that he can rent that could hold those programs, that he could support with some of that excess in the enterprise fund. I know space is probably at a premium in Arlington right now, and I don't know when he would be able to do that. Wanda had the brilliant idea that we should just build that facility on top of the Fox Library when we do it, but I'm sure you'll hear when we get to the capital budget, it's not clear when we're doing the Fox Library either. So
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, Grant.
What kind of space do they need?
I think he would like space that is, when the elementary schools do elementary after schools, it's an elementary school classroom. The furniture is the right size, the play equipment is correct, so on and so forth. Elementary schools in a junior high school, elementary kids in a junior high school, scale of the furniture is a little different. The available play materials are different, so on and so forth. So I think
No,
that's what he's saying by not ideal.
I can appreciate
Yeah.
why that wouldn't be ideal. I guess I was asking what is ideal, because space, I don't know that space
Yeah.
is at such a premium.
Well,
But I don't know about the kind of space he's looking for.
I mean, he would be looking for space that's classroom space, right? Or that could be configured as classroom space. I mean, if you've ever been in a daycare center, it's still configured.
Yeah,
pretty-
usually it's bigger than a classroom. That's kind of that's why
Yeah.
I was thinking. Usually it's actually bigger than a classroom, but
Well,
that's okay.
right.
Not budget related. That's right.
Yeah, not budget related. I mean, for elementary school kids, it's multiple classrooms, right? It's not quite, the preschool, I think, is different, but elementary school, he'd be looking for ideally space that's more like an elementary school.
I think it's more like a gym. But
Yes,
that's
and he
okay.
used to have a gym when
Right.
the Gibbs, before the Gibbs was renovated, the gym was part of the rec program, but I don't know as he did the whole preschool there. I don't remember.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Alan, did you have another question? Okay.
Any other questions? So Annie, I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
So two of the questions are sort of operational, two are capital.
Mhm.
First of all, why do they have retained earnings? You said it was 900,000 or some number?
$733,000.
$733,000. That seems like a huge amount of retained earnings.
Yeah.
Is that seasonal or is that real?
No, I believe that's real. Like, I don't believe that during the course of a budget year, he's moving money into retained earnings and moving it out again. And I didn't ask him that question because what we wanted to know was, what are the retained earnings? But we could go back and ask him how that was accumulated, but I believe that Joe is not entirely responsible for that balance because, he had a tenure and then he left and then he came back. And I think the folks in between, he did say that there's a position he's not filling that was an assistant director of recreation that he didn't feel was necessary. So it may be just that he has a different financial philosophy than the previous occupant of the office.
Okay, so
I'm happy to go back and ask.
I recall in prior presentations on this budget that there was always a sort of a mysterious discussion about getting, let me just give it as a hypothetical example, that they would get money in from the summertime baseball program, let's say, make all the deposits in May, but the expenses would actually occur in July and August. So they would have a huge balance at the end of the fiscal year. I'm just wondering if that's something like that is going on here.
He did not mention that.
Okay.
And I would think that would be covered by that use of retained earnings, that he would, would have been budgeting honestly for that.
Well, I mean, it would be if they're at the end of the at the year, and then they could be normal expenses in the going forward period. I don't know. The second question is: are there any capital expenses in here? Is he making any contributions to capital improvements out of this budget?
There is. We did not discuss that in terms of the recreation budget, but we did discuss it when we get to rink. If you want me to move on to rink, I can tell you what's going
okay.
on.
We can talk about that under the rink. So in the 2020 actual, there was a contracted services.
No, I'm sorry. I take it back. It is in this budget. So see this line for debt service.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so
28.
this was a discussion that we had.
But is it, the reservoir come under this budget?
Yes, well, so I believe that Joe is negotiating with Sandy over this, and that Joe does not feel that the recreation budget should carry the entire reservoir budget, but that his budget will be contributing to the debt service on the reservoir project beginning in next fiscal year.
Okay, that's so that big, I mean, I think they've spent $5 million there or something like that, right?
Yes, but some of that was a water quality and water, weed removal in the reservoir itself and the walking paths, and all of which would be on the parks side of Park and Recreation, not the recreation side.
Okay,
So he's feeling like paying for that entire project out of the recreation budget, the Recreation Enterprise Fund, is not quite fair, that some of that should be carried by natural resources. So we could ask about that when the cap budget comes in, or we could ask Sandy and Adam.
so in fiscal, if you go up to the top of that page, in fiscal 20, there was a contract services of 377,000, which doesn't show up anywhere else.
Let's see, I believe that's part of what he split out. So
Okay.
that contracted services is turned into fall, winter, spring, summer.
Okay, got it.
Contracted and in-house.
All right. Okay,
Okay, yeah, and that's part of him wanting more fine-grained control of what's making money and what's not.
and if we go down to the revenue side, how much money is he getting from other town budgets?
He is not getting any money from other town budgets. What
Okay.
he said by way of this transfer from general fund is
Yeah, it's
that only happens when there's a contract change in a year. Like, in other words, if he's budgeted flat because we haven't settled the contract gets settled. That's what this transfer was the town covering the contract differential that he hadn't budgeted for. But it was small and it's not in this year's budget.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Al Tossi, and then Grant again.
Yeah. Annie, I'm just having a little trouble
Mm-hmm.
in the fund balances here.
Mhm.
So when I look back at
Mhm.
last year's budget
Yes.
for actuals for 2020,
Mm-hmm.
in fiscal 2020, we had a surplus of 354,000 and change. And the balance at the end of 2020 was 378,000 and change. Okay, so we've got a balance resulting from a surplus that year.
Yep.
Now, when we go to 2021,
Mm-hmm.
we lost 383,000 and change. And yet we have a surplus of over 700,000. That just doesn't follow.
I'm happy to go. I mean, I could go to Ida or to Sandy and ask them what they know about it.
Yeah,
just-
just see how the fund balances play out.
Yeah.
If we had a surplus the prior year, say over $1 million, we
Mhm.
lost 300,000, we got 700 left, that sort of
Right.
flows, but this one doesn't. So
Gotcha.
if you could just sort of check that out, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. Absolutely.
Look, Al, how do you conclude that the 21 actual was a loss? Is that in the transfer from other services?
If you look at the 2021 actuals, the summary at the top of the.
Oh,
section-
yeah, okay, I got it.
Mhm.
Right. Yeah, and then there's no surpluses in the other years.
Uh,
Well, those are
okay.
budgets.
No, no,
Those
no,
are
no, no, no,
budgets.
no, no, no. Remember this, what looks like a negative number in revenue is actually a positive number on the revenue side.
Yeah, it's weird that way.
So these two kind of balance each other out. So there was sort of no contribution to that balance at that point. So you're right, Al, that's an interesting question. How does he end up with that much money in the budget?
Wait, it's Dean, I don't understand the question.
The question is, how did we accumulate $732,000 when in the past, we don't believe we've had that much money in the fund?
Well, what was the balance at the end of 20?
Um,
It was
78,000.
So the
It
balance
was a-
was,
No, it was a negative 354,000.
Well, that was the loss that year. But I don't know if that was the
Yeah.
balance in the fund. That would have
Right,
come out of
right.
the fund.
No,
correct.
fiscal 20 had a surplus.
No, they're in as
Revenue-
accounting
Wait a
numbers.
minute.
There's accounting numbers.
Yeah.
Fiscal 20 had a loss, fiscal 21 had a surplus.
Deficit. We ended up with a balance of 378. Means there
The
must be
year
a
or at the end of the year, Alan?
Mhm.
And there was an actual surplus in 21. I'm sorry, these parentheses are getting a little,
Yeah, I know. They make me nuts too.
yeah.
Yeah, if we had a
I-
positive balance at the end of 20 and then added 384 to it, I think that's getting close to the
100,000. Yeah.
current number.
Okay,
I mean, the word balance there is a terrible word. It should be
Well,
lost.
So maybe what we want is some kind of report on the flows in and out of that fund for a period of time.
Yes,
Okay.
that's what I was going to ask for.
Yeah. So why don't we see if we can get that?
Yep.
Do you want to hold the budget until then, or do you want to
Yes.
vote this guy?
Yes, let's just hold
Okay.
the vote.
All right. So we'll hold the vote. Should we look at the rink?
Yes, please.
Okay. I just want to point out to everybody that Wanda took copious notes about all of the expense lines, which are here in our folder, if you want to take a look at them. So if anybody's concerned about any of the details of the expense lines, I know nobody asked, and it's an enterprise fund, so we don't worry too much, but we did ask all the why is this up, why is that down questions. Okay, let's go on to the rink, which is a little bit simpler. So these are the expenses. Okay. That same fund balance for the rink is $102,392. So that's a much smaller reserve. Okay. No big, huge changes in anything here other than, this again probably reflects changes in minimum wage. And yeah. And then this is the revenue side, and this jump in revenue is an increase in fees for ice time. So he increased the fees $10 an hour. And then the concession stand is apparently less popular during COVID. People don't want to, eat indoors, so they're not purchasing food from the concession stand. Shoot, I did not ask him about this transfer from other funds. So I may need to go back and ask about that too. Other questions about the expense?
Let's go back to that transfer from other funds.
It's about $13,000.
These are revenues,
Yes,
right? Okay. So, and what was the budgeted 22 and 23? What is the budget balance? Is it zero?
so this is the summary.
Yeah, okay, so that's definitely making up.
Yeah.
So basically.
Remember, these would have been positive balances, but he's.
Yeah. So on the other hand, they have a balance, you said at the beginning of this year of 115,000. Was that what I heard you say?
102.
102,000.
102,000, yes.
So the balance was more than covered the what they've taken in from the other departments. Is there a possibility that could be something to do with something like these water and sewer cross charges that we we make?
It's possible. I should go back and ask. So we may want to hold this budget also. I'm sorry, I didn't notice that number because it was relatively small and I was worried about this one. So let me send Joe an email and see if he can
Yeah,
tell me.
why don't we
about
just
that.
do that? And then so just document those two questions and then we could just quickly dispatch this at the next meeting.
Yep. Okay, so we want to know. So it was that question, and what was the other question, Charlie?
Why 714,000 in the other
Yeah,
budget?
why is that budget there? Yeah, that's right.
What's the cash flow in and out over the years?
Okay. Any other questions, Alan?
Annie, going back to the COVID response, you were talking about cost shifting from the rink to rec. I'm inferring from this that was a one-time response. I don't see any cost shifting in the budgets. Was that just
No,
bookkeeping?
what I'm saying that Joe is doing budget wise is that he's carrying this utility budget that he's carrying here includes more of the rink's electricity budget. I mean, it also includes lights for the fields and so on and so forth. But, and so does this. So what he's done is he's taking a little bit of the building costs into the recreation budget, a little bit more than in the past.
Okay, I mean, I don't
That's
see
the
any.
cost shifting he's doing.
Okay, I don't see any reduction in expenses in the rink budget, but maybe there would have been larger increases. So this
Yeah,
cost shifting is permanent.
That's really what it is. Yeah. I mean, that, I don't think he's reducing their expenses necessarily. He's covering some of their increase.
Okay, so it's not a temporary response. He's actually doing cost shifting on an
Yeah,
ongoing
on a
basis.
permanent basis.
Okay, thank you.
He's saying it's fairer to assume more of it in the recreation budget where he's less break even and makes more money.
Okay,
That's-
maybe triggered by the pandemic, but it'll be ongoing. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think it's just how Joe manages, right? So.
I would be concerned. I mean, if he's shifting the cost from the rink to the recreation budget, it should be representative of where the actual cost expenditures are. I mean, it should be arbitrary.
Yeah, I don't think it's arbitrary. I mean, he had a justification for it. So this $18,000, it's essentially because the recreation department offices are in that building.
I got it. Okay.
Okay, and so he's saying I should spend some money on the building from the recreation budget.
Got it.
And same thing with this $85,000. There's some portion of that, I think it's this 29, that he is assuming because the recreation department also uses the building. And so he's paying some of the electricity cost.
Okay.
Electricity is a big deal in the rink because he has to spend money on electricity to maintain the ice.
Yep.
Right.
Right.
And so, that's a big chunk of change. And it's bigger depending on the weather.
So, but in the aggregate between two budgets, he's really not taking much money out of the other municipal accounts.
Very little. And like I said, I think we should double check on this number just to see whether it's actually coming out of the municipal account or not.
Yep.
It may be that it's shifting from the recreation fund somewhere or something. I don't know.
Is it possible that's the electricity, quote unquote, let's say transfer?
I don't think so, because he would have called that out specifically.
No, I would agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think what he was really saying is I get one electricity bill and I'm putting some of that electricity bill in this budget and some of it in that budget. And it's the electricity bill for the building. And this electricity number isn't just the building, right? It also includes lights at fields and things like that. So
Okay.
Okay.
Why don't we move on? So you're gonna revisit.
Yeah, I'm gonna revisit a couple of things and then we'll do a quick vote when I have
Okay.
answers.
Thank you.
We have our budget review with Christine Bongiorno in the morning, so we'll have that by Wednesday, I believe, unless during that review, we come across some things that we want to further explore. So, and I know Wanda's team,
Those are your budgets for tonight?
those are my budgets for tonight.
Okay, thank you. By the way, Annie and Wanda, I think your documentation approach here using the SharePoint site is really great. And hopefully we can all follow a similar path. That's super.
Yeah, and I really wanted it historically documented. And I just want to say that, you know, Wanda and I are turning out to be a great team. She comes up with great questions, and I appreciated her particularly this morning when I was half asleep, taking good notes on line item by line item. So Wanda, like, take a bow or something.
Big shout out for Wanda.
Big shout out for Wanda. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other budgets tonight? We had none on the schedule. Is there anybody dying to present their budget?
Charlie, I think Bill and I could at least present
Reserve. I'm
one
sorry.
or two budgets.
Go right ahead, Al.
Bill, do you want to present the controller's budget?
Why don't you start with it and I'll chime in.
Okay, so why don't we do the control?
Al, would you like me to share my screen?
Yeah, I think you should.
Okay.
And we just lost Al. Technology's great.
It's the controller's curse.
He'll come back. Is Al off the screen?
He's still in the meeting. The screen is just dark.
And I think,
Okay, now I think he's gone.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, now he's gone. I'll wait to see if he comes back in.
Could be his computer died.
Maybe I'll check in with Al and see if he's,
Oh, Bill can present it, right?
Well, we got some emails late in the afternoon today, and I confess, because I thought we were going on Wednesday, that I haven't gone through all of Rich's and Edith's follow-ups to some questions that we had this morning with them. So that's why I'm a little hesitant to jump in right here.
let me just check and see if Al's available.
Oh, here he is coming back in now.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. When I brought my budget book over, it knocked out the my internet connection.
I was just gonna think something
So-
like that happened.
So we have the budget book on the screen, Al. Is that okay?
So I'm just going down the side pieces here: salaries and wages, overtime, longevity. The stipends are, there's 3 people in the union there.
Next page, Sarah.
Whoops.
No, this page is fine.
Oh, okay.
The stipends are for the cleaning of uniforms, which of course, don't exist, but it's a union contract issue. So that's just set in concrete. Now, in-state travel is for conferences. All 4 of the staff in the controller's budgets attend these. The controller wants to keep so everybody can do everybody else's job, and they can learn and keep up with this. So to date, they spent about $575 in-state travel. In March, they're going to be sending 3 people to a conference in Saugus that'll start eating that up. The out-of-state travel is primarily for Munis. They haven't been spending money the last couple of years because of the, obviously because of the pandemic. They are planning to go to a May conference out of state, which will use up a substantial portion of that money. The telephone expenses are for the department head's cell phone. I guess all department heads have a cell phone. They seem to put the expenses in different places, which I want to talk to Sandy about, so it's all in the same place, but that's what the telephone expenses are. Dues and subscriptions is pretty straightforward. All the money for this year is encumbered. Training is for Munis, the chart of accounts, and the conversion of water and sewer. They hope to have some of those done by the end of this year, but most of the training money is for that. Right now, they've encumbered about $500 to $600, but they intend to spend a good part of that by the end of the year. And then the rest is pretty straightforward. It's just office supplies. She's trying to congregate all of this under just one line item of office supplies. There's a drop in personnel because the assistant controller retired. The senior accountant was transferred or promoted to the role of assistant controller, and then they brought in another person from the clerk's office to be the senior accountant. So that ins and outs accounts for a large percentage of the $12,000 drop. It also accounts obviously for the drop in longevity. So Bill and I think, are satisfied with the total of the $335,980. And Bill, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think we hit all the main points that we talked about this morning. I'd just say under step, there was the step total came to $6,783 versus $2,000 the previous year. Again, that relates to the changes in personnel and the elevating of one person up to the next level. So that checks out okay.
So we're ready to try to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for Al and Bill on the controller's budget?
Oh, I have one very
Go ahead,
minor
Gary.
one. Thank you. Had my hand raised. We talk about the chart of accounts being changed and everything else like that. Are we going to change the heading of the department from comptroller to controller one of these days?
No,
think
because
the
it's
same-
right the way it is.
They're the same
Okay.
thing. I mean the same word.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I think it's correct the way it is.
It is.
You
I'm
go
not so
back
sure
two or
that's
three-
a-
you
that's
go
a
back
budget
2 or
question.
3 budget books, you'll see that it's the same, described the same way, controller with a P.
Oh,
So-
yeah, that was the term.
Gentlemen, let's not get off
Yeah.
base here
Yeah.
on a side discussion, okay?
Yeah, that's always been the term. It's just, that was the term that was used like when I, got my college degree on slate. So, okay.
Excuse me. Any questions about the comptroller's budget? So Al, I have one question. You made a reference to the, I guess, munis and training. Oh, we have a note here from Wanda that says the comptroller is used in government entities. There we go. Thank you, Wanda. Is this related to, and you mentioned the water and sewer conversion, is this also related to the continued use of Informix by the IT department?
Yes. I think the water and sewer, correct me if I'm wrong, Bill, but I think the water and sewer conversion is the last one to go into Munis. And that's the reason we're meeting with IT on Friday. And I've already told them that will be an issue, but hopefully when the water and sewer bills is fully converted, and I actually think they're starting to run the bills with the new system, that Infomax software can be eliminated.
Thank you. Any other questions on the comptroller's budget? All right. Did you make a motion, Al? I don't think so.
I make a motion that we appropriate $335,980.
Is there a second for that?
Second.
So it's been moved and seconded for $335,980 in the comptroller's budget. Any further discussion? So going to a vote, Grant Gibeon,
Yes.
Shane Blundell,
Yes.
John Ellis,
Yes.
Micaiah Healy,
Yes.
Sophie Migliazzo,
Yes.
Jonathan Wallach,
Yes.
Shailene,
Yes.
Daryl,
Yes.
Annie LaCourte,
Yes.
Alan Jones,
Yes.
George Koser,
Yes.
Bill Keller,
Yes.
Alan Tosti,
Yes.
Wanda Nascimento,
Yes.
Christine Deschler,
Yes.
Dean Corman,
Yes.
and David McKenna.
Yes.
Thank you. That comptroller's budget is unanimous for $335,980. So do you have another budget, Al?
Well, we can do the reserve fund.
I'll go ahead with that.
Let's do it.
Okay,
Okay,
the reserve
so-
fund, as recommended by the manager's office. And remember, we're doing basically 1% of the revenues minus exempt debt. Is 1,753,178. So it goes along with the 1% that we've used for the last several years as a target. And we might be needing some of this money this year for the snow and ice. The reserve school was only for 1 year. For this year, in case school enrollment went above what it was in, I think, 2019. So we don't need that this year. So I make a motion for 1,753,178.
Is there a second?
Second.
So any discussion? Okay, let me make a comment about the reserve fund amounts for the school. I had a discussion with Sandy Pooler about this about a week ago. And I don't know whether they're planning to have a special town meeting during the town meeting as we have had in the past or not. But if you remember in the 5-year plan that the manager presented, they were counting that 1,094,055 as revenue for fiscal year 23. And if I don't know the mechanism for getting that money into the budget, except if there is an appropriation by town meeting prior to July 1st, 2022. So they may come back with some other clever scheme, but right now, if they're going to count that as revenue, it has to be dispensed with before the end of this fiscal year.
Couldn't they just let it go back to free cash?
Well, yeah, except that then we'd have to depart from our traditional method of using more than half of the free cash. And I think that we have tried to avoid departing from that policy.
Yeah.
So that's just a side comment so that you wouldn't be surprised if you see that number pop up again when the warrant articles come out. Any additional comments on the reserve fund? Okay, so we'll so it's been moved and seconded for $1,753,178 for the reserve fund. Grant Gibeon,
Yes.
Shane Blundell,
Yes.
John Ellis,
Yes.
Kaya Healy,
Yes.
Brian Beck, Sophie Migliazzo,
Yes.
Jonathan Wallach,
Yes.
Shailene,
Yes.
Daryl,
Yes.
Annie,
Yes.
Alan,
Yes.
George Koser,
Yes.
Keller,
Yes.
Al Tosti,
Yes.
Wanda Nascimento,
Yes.
Christine Deschler,
Yes.
Dean Carmen,
Yes.
and David McKenna.
Yes.
Thank you. The reserve fund budget of $1,753,178 is passed unanimously. Thank you very much. Are there any more budgets for this evening?
Well, Bill and I met with Rich Greco on the retirement budget this morning, and we felt comfortable with it. Bill, are you okay moving ahead with it?
I'm okay moving ahead with it. I mean, there's the actual budget pages that are pretty straightforward, and there's a lot more data, financial data relating to OPEB and the management of the money. I don't know how much we want to get into that, but I felt pretty good leaving the meeting this morning.
Okay. Tara, do you have that spreadsheet that PowerPoint?
Yes, I am opening that now. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Now, one of the firm rules I've always followed in getting materials to present is the use of plagiarism. And so these are not my charts. These are from Rich, the board administrator of it. So let me go through this as background, and then we'll go to the actual budget. The first couple are on the first one is the non-contributory budget. Now, these are people or their survivors who worked for the town back in 1940, before 1940, when we had a non-contributory retirement plan. And the last person there is, you see up top, she is a survivor. She's the last one. And that is the amount that we need to appropriate is $19,817. So when we go to the actual budget, we're going to be changing the budget that we got from the manager's office to this $19,817. It involves a $900 turnaround, but this is the correct number to use. So, and we're going to be looking in a warrant article to appropriate 481,983 or 83 into the OPEB fund. That is 500,000, which was our original target, minus the 19,000 comes out to 481. So that's the number that we're going to be dealing with when we get to the OPEB article. Next slide, Tara.
Alan, before you go to the next slide, for the sake of our newer members, can you just explain the $500,000 and the OPEB and why we're doing that?
Sure. First of all, OPEB is other post-employment benefits. And now we deal with two large liabilities in the town. The first liability, the big one that we've always dealt with is the retirement. Because all the people that are working for the town, plus all the retirees, they have a statutory amount of money that they're going to be getting for the rest of their lives and their survivors' lives. So the town needs to account for that. And for many, many years, up until the late 80s, we've only accounted for it in a pay-as-you-go, like Social Security. Starting in the early 80s, the town started putting money aside to account for this. And in the late 80s, the state passed a law that said you have to account for it and be fully funded by a certain date. So that's the retirement system. The other post-employment is something that our former treasurer, John Billifer, brought up with and pushed the town to start funding, because statutorily, if a retiree meets certain requirements, we also have to pay for their health insurance. Now, so what we started with was, many years ago, the non-contributory budget was about 500,000. And he suggested, and the town accepted, that we'll take the 500,000, we'll subtract what we actually owe these people, and the balance goes into the OPEB fund. Now, since the number of people in the non-contributory was a set number, there's no more people going into it after a certain year, that number is always going to go down. And so over the last, 20 years, 25 years, we've been following this pattern. Take 500, subtract what we have to pay, and the balance goes into the OPEB fund. So now we're to the point where the 500 is there. We only owe 19,000. So the balance of 481 goes into the OPEB fund. Now there are several other funds or amounts that we put into that, which I'll go into when we get into the warrant article on funding the OPEB fund. But that's where the 500 was sort of a base we started with. And then we've been constantly appropriating money into it. Right now, the balance in the OPEB fund is, if Terry, you can go to the next page. This is a little small, but we have about $22 million in the OPEB fund. Thank you, Tara. In the OPEB fund right now. That sounds like a lot of money, but the actuarial liability for the other post-employment is about 220 million. So we really are only funding about 10% of the unfunded liability. Now, Tara forwarded you two studies today. One is the retirement actuarial study, and the other is the OPEB liability study. So those are done periodically. Those are our two big liabilities. The retirement fund, I'll get to in a minute. This is the amount of money that we're setting aside in the OPEB fund. Now, the retirement cash money that we have is invested by the state. We joined the PRIT system, about 8, 10, 12 years ago. But this 22 million is still controlled by the Arlington retirement system. They've hired this Makeda to invest this money. Basically, it's invested in Vanguard mutual funds. And you see a variety there, some fixed rate, most of them equity funds. Since this money is going for long term, the money needs to be in equity funds or we'll just never get there. So that's where the OPEB, and maybe I should stop there and see if there's any questions about the OPEB.
I have just a quick comment, everyone. So those documents have not been sent to you yet because this was originally for Wednesday's budget. So I will send those documents to you. I can actually do that right now.
Yeah, they really don't have any impact as far as what we do or don't do with the budget. The budget is told to us by the state how much we have to appropriate. So much comes from the Housing Authority, the balance we have to appropriate. So any questions you might have in the future on the actuarial studies really doesn't impact our vote on the budget. So are there any questions on the OPEB?
I don't think so, Al.
Okay, then Tara, let's go to the next page. Okay, this is just another further breakdown from the prior page on the OPEB fund. So Tara, the next page. Okay, now we're into the Arlington retirement system. And this is out of the actuarial study that was done as of January 1st, 2021. So you can see as it goes across, you have the normal cost, whoops, you have the normal cost there of the amount of money that we have to pay. There's the unfunded liability we have. And it goes across to the scheduled contribution. So you see the 15,431,542. That's the amount of money that we must appropriate or we must account for in the retirement budget. Now the manager went to the retirement board, I think it was last year or this fall, and they accepted that they will grow their retirement appropriation by 5.5% to try to help the general fund. And so you see with the scheduled appropriation is going to grow 5.5% down the line. So in 2033, we will basically pay off the unfunded liability. In other words, we will have the unfunded liability covered by the amount of money we have in the PRIT system, I think plus 2%. So from 2034 on, all we have to appropriate is the normal cost for our current employees. And as you could see in 2033 and 2034, the amount of money that we have to appropriate goes way down. So we are going to be in those years and thereafter sort of swimming in cash, which makes me a little nervous because as people get close to that, these surplus funds tend to get spent 4 times. The manager's position and my strong recommendation is that any money in 33 and 34 and beyond that is freed up because we've eliminated the unfunded liability of the retirement system, then be utilized to eliminate the unfunded liability of the OPEB fund. So we don't have to deal with that policy right now, but at some point when we have a little bit of time, I'd like to discuss that. And I'm going to talk about it with the manager and see if we can get the finance committee and the board of selectmen all on board with that objective. Okay, Tara, the next page. Now this is sort of an interesting part. Chapter 32, section 3(8)(c) is an amount of the general laws that allows an appeal from another board on their share of what is owed an Arlington retiree. So let's say, for example, somebody worked for the town of Winchester for 20 years and then came and worked for the town of Arlington for 20 years and retired as a town of Arlington retiree. Winchester says, okay, he worked for us for 20 years. This is the amount we say we owe the town of Arlington. The town of Arlington has the right to object to that if they think that's wrong. And we could appeal to the state PARAC board. So our retirement board has been under the leadership of the Rich Greco, the administrator, has been very aggressive in utilizing this law to protest. Perhaps one of the big example, let's say we have a selectman in the town of Arlington who has earned his $3,000 a year and paid into the system over the years. He then goes to another town and works as a full-time employee. And let's say it's 20 years each. And Winchester says, well, you owe us half of his retirement. And Arlington says, oh, wait a minute, he only earned $3,000 a year for us. His retirement is much bigger for you. You know, we protest that. PARAC says we agree and agrees with Arlington, and we get a much lower savings, a much lower amount of money that we have to pay. That's an actual case, by the way. So that's what the whole 3/8C is involved. So, you know, I commend our retirement board for being very active. Some boards aren't active at this at all, but we try to pick up, the retirement board tries to pick up every savings. So that's what this 3/8C is all about. Okay, Tara, next page. Okay, so here's the letter from PARAC, which is the state agency. They look at all the numbers presented by the Arlington Retirement Board and say 15,431,542. That's what the town of Arlington has to come up with. Okay, next page. Tara?
1 second, I'm just taking something for the notes really quick.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so here's what happens in Arlington. We've got to come up with 15,431,52 on the right. But the Arlington Housing Authority is a member of the Arlington Retirement Board. So the Arlington Housing Authority has to pay its share, which is $584,855. And so the amount of money that the Arlington has to appropriate with, as far as the town, the money we are involved with is $14,846,687, which is what you see in the town budget presented by the manager. And next page, Tara. So this is the PRIMS funds or investment return that we've been getting. And as you go down through it, PRIT has been doing pretty well. Actually, everybody's been doing pretty well over the last year. But so last year, net of fees, they made about 20% return, which is pretty good. So that investment has been pretty good. I think, Tara, if you could go to the last page.
This one?
These are the expenses. We've gone down through each item. Yeah, being a little better. So that the budget of the expenses is $449,555. Down below, you see these are the expenses from the investments. In other words, PRIT basically takes off the top the share from all their advisors. So we don't actually appropriate that money. It just doesn't, it just, we don't see that. So this is their expense budget. The 449,555 comes out of the retirement board funds. So again, we don't actually appropriate any of this, but they have agreed over the years to show them the budget. I think most of it is pretty straightforward. If anybody has any questions, I'll be happy to answer that.
Any questions for Al on the operating expenses of the contributory retirement board? Okay,
The custodian of the funds, by the way, is the town treasurer.
okay, Al, I think we might be ready for a vote.
Okay, so if you go to the page 152. Now, the retirement cost is the 14,846,687. Now, the next line, 18,917, is wrong. So you cross off 18,917 and substitute 19,817.
And what's the new total?
14,866,504. 14,866,504. And then you subtract off the offsets, and the number is 13,387,650.
Is that a motion?
Basically is a $900 reversal.
Is that a motion?
That is a motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
So it's been moved and seconded. Any other questions for Al or Bill on this budget?
Just, are we gonna put that presentation into SharePoint somewhere?
It is in SharePoint, yes, and I just sent out an email with the link to that. Yes.
Excellent.
And the, like I said, the actuarial reports are also sent to you. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer it. It really doesn't affect this budget. Well, it does affect the budget, but there's nothing we can do about it.
Any other questions? It's been moved and seconded. Okay, so we'll vote.
Charlie,
I'm sorry.
Sorry, I have one quick question, hopefully quick.
Good. Go ahead.
Is there a schedule for the OPEB too, to get the OPEB on fully funded?
Well, we don't, usually if you do something like this, you figure out this is what we owe, this is what we have, this is the liability. You spread it over, 20 years or 30 years and say, this is what you've got to contribute. That's what we do with the retirement system. With the OPEB system, we're not funding it that way. We're sort of funding it with what we have. And what we have is the amount of money, the 481 that I mentioned before, that's sort of the balance of that 500,000. We throw in 300,000 out of the health insurance trust fund, which we no longer need each year. And there's another balance of 155 from a reduction the selectmen made in employee retiree health insurance. So right now we're funding it with money that we have. It's not part of an actuarial study. Otherwise, we probably have to fund about 12 million a year.
So actually, there's one more wrinkle to that, and that is that the OPEB, the retirement funding has to be according to a fully funded schedule under the state law. I mean, that's absolutely required. And so we have to pay enough money in to be fully funded by a date certain in the future. I think it's 2037 or something like that.
Yeah,
On the-
2040.
2040. The OPEB budget we are strictly speaking not required to fund post-retirement employee benefits. However, they are part of multiple collective bargaining negotiations with employees, and has not been clarified by the courts whether a town actually has to pay these or not. So what we're faced with is a ruling by the government services accounting board or something like that. And basically they say that if you fully fund every year an amount that gets you, if you fund an amount every year that gets you fully funded by a certain date, then you use a discount rate equal to the cost of money. And that discount rate might be, 2% or something like that. On the other hand, if you don't fund at a higher rate, the liability is calculated using a much higher rate of return, like 7% or 8% or something on that order. So the 220 million that Al mentioned is really based on that 8%. If we were putting more money in, it would be based on 1%, and the number would be much smaller. So the OPEB situation is somewhat, I'll just use the word clouded, but we absolutely do have a liability there.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Questions? Any questions further? All right. let's take a
Alan
vote.
Jones.
Wait,
Alan Jones. Alan.
so Charlie, based on that, in 2034, do you think we'll cross the threshold so we can use the lower discount rate?
If
we follow the policy of,
yes, yeah, I mean, just heuristically, yes. I mean, I'm sure there's a quantitative answer, but likely if we followed Al Tossi's suggestion of transferring that money, we probably would have the lower the low discount rate, and be fully funded at a much sooner date too.
okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay. Questions? No. Therefore, let's take a vote. Grant Gibeon,
Yes.
Shane Blundell,
Yes.
John Ellis,
Yes.
Micaiah,
Yes.
Brian Becker, Sophie Migliazzo,
Yes.
Jonathan Wallach,
Yes.
Shailene,
Yes.
Daryl,
Yes.
Annie LaCourte,
Yes.
Alan Jones,
Yes.
George Koser,
Yes.
Bill Keller,
Yes.
Al Tossi,
Yes.
Wanda Nascimento,
Yes.
Christine Deschler,
Yes.
Dean Carmen,
Yes.
and David McKenna.
Yes.
It's a unanimous vote for $13,387,650 for the retirement budget. So we are just making it 60 seconds under the Mary Ronan rule. A motion to adjourn is in order.
So moved.
So moved.
I hereby acclamation that we are adjourned. Happy Valentine's.
Whatever.
Good night.
Good night.